My name is Ganesh, and I'll be your instructor for today's class. I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I'm glad that you all can join us today. So like you said, today we're going to do a few things. First, we're going to add the data client controls to the Visual Studio Toolbox. Then we'll use a no-code method using the live binding model to read, subscribe, and write to a tag in my OPC server. And then we're going to write a little bit of code in VB.NET. I want to go ahead and mention that we do have plans to also provide you with an identical application to what you'll see today in C#. I did see some of you use other development languages such as C and Python, and we have examples in those languages as well that we will make available to you. So to start, anytime I add something to the Visual Studio Toolbox, I like to add a tab and name it appropriately. And then we'll choose items. These are all going to be .NET Framework components. I'm going to browse to the install directory where you'll find these DLLs that we need to add. And there are 5 DLLs in here that we need to add. And I know what some of you might be thinking right now. These are a lot of DLLs. How would I possibly know which 5 to add? Well, you do it long enough, you might know, but a little pro tip here. If you sort these by size, it's actually the 5 largest ones that you add. And you can add all 5 at once, so I selected all of those. And I will click open. Okay. So I added all 5 just to cover our bases, just so you can see here that there are very many controls and dialogues that we can use with the OPC data client. Today, of course, we'll just be using a few of those. So to start, we're gonna go ahead and start our no code portion of the training. To start, we're gonna add this DA connectivity control. But while we're still in here in the toolbox, I do want to point out that there's a UA connectivity control as well. Everything that I do here for the no code portion will be for OPC DA, but you can do it for OPC UA as well. Likewise, for the code part, which will be in OPC UA, you can do as well in OPC DA. So when I added that DA connectivity control, you can see that I added a point binder and a binding extender control as well. I'm also going to go ahead and add a button and a text box. I'm going to name these, give these a more appropriate name. So this is my no code text box. And this will be my no code write button. And I'm also going to want to change the label on that. I'll do execute write. Just make it a tad bigger to show that. Now I want to select this text box because this is the control that I want to actually bind to my OPC tag. Come down here to bind to point. It brings up this point editor. This point editor is going to be a OPC DA server browser. So I'm going to browse the local machine. You can see these are all the OPC DA servers that I have on my machine. The one we're using today is the Toolbox OPC Power Server. Some of you may be familiar with that, known as just the top server. And the tag that I'm interested in today is channel1.device1.tag1. I do want to show you all this real quick. These DA properties over here. And these are the DA properties that top server is exposing to the data client right now. And I'm only pointing this out because I have had users that have a need to access these properties. There is a data client method to get property ID, and using, or get property value is the method, and using these property IDs you can access these. Sometimes people need to access the data type, or they want to know the value of the tag, and in this case, you can check with the value property without actually performing a full read down to your device. So I just wanted to point those out real quick. So my tag 1 is the one that we're binding to. And that's the bare minimum for this. Right now, this text box is bound to that tag 1 in my top server to read and subscribe. The subscription by default is a 1-second update rate. I'm going to come down here to live to edit live bindings so we can look at this in a little more detail. So yeah, by default, it's going to read and subscribe. You can see the subscribe parameters, 100 milliseconds, or 1000 milliseconds, excuse me. And of course, we can change that if we want to. But I didn't add that write button for nothing. I do want to be able to write as well. So I'm going to select this there. You can see now my binding operations are all. But to be able to actually perform that write, we need to change the source component of our write event source to be that write button that we added. So now you can see that when that button is clicked, that's what's going to trigger this write event. And down here you can see that's the item that we added, and we're looking at the value. You can also change this. You can make it so that we are accessing the timestamp or the quality. I have seen people in the past, they'll put on their form 3 text boxes, each one representing, one for value, one for timestamp, one for quality. And that's how you would do that. You would just create 3 different bindings and change the argument's path for the point that you're referencing. So we'll click OK there. Save. And let's run the application and see what that functionality looks like right now. Okay. So as you can see, it automatically subscribed with a value of 40, but don't take my word for it. This is another client that's communicating to the same tag. You can see here the value is also 40. So let's try to do a write from here. So I execute that write. You see it update in the quick client. And now let's perform a write from the quick client. And we see it update back in our application. So far so good. It's working just as we'd expect. Now I do want to build on this a little bit just to show you guys. We have this industrial gadgets. This is a graphics add-on that Software Toolbox offers. I'm going to use this meter control, and we're also going to bind to this. What I want to show you by doing this is that this is not limited to just Microsoft Windows form controls. Any .NET component that you have in here, this binding extender does exactly that. It extends the functionality of that control and allows it to implement OPC. So we're going to pretty much do the same thing. I'm going to come down here, except I'm going to go to live bindings, edit live bindings, and I'm just going to add it here. We're only going to read and subscribe. There's no read event source or write event source that I need to trigger, but I am going to browse for that point again. And we'll just come down in here, select the same tag. And yep, make sure that's there. The other thing we want to make sure here is that the value target is tied to the value, so that that meter control knows that it's going to use the value to change where that dial is. I'm also going to come into these gadget properties real quick. You can see you can change the appearance here. I'm going to remove the units, but you can obviously change that to whatever you need. I'm going to put tag 1 just because that's the name of the tag that I'm communicating with. Apply those changes. Okay. And let's see that in action real quick. Look at, no, I did not. Okay, here it goes, and you can see that just like our text box, this little meter over here shows a value of 40. If I update that, the meter updates with the value as well. And so as we can see here, that didn't take much time at all, and we are able to read and write to this tag in our OPC server without writing a single line of code. And that concludes the instruction on the no code part. One thing I do want to mention is that it is possible to implement like error handling without writing any code as well. We certainly have documentation on that we can provide. It involves using this Windows Control Error Provider. Unfortunately, due to time, we're not going to do that, but I did want to mention that that is possible, that even for error handling, you do not need to write code. And so, yeah, that concludes the no code portion.